We just saw one in the center.
Yeah.
But they sure got the media's
Of course, on
attention.
the news, it probably looked like there were hundreds
Oh,
there
God.
because they had this picture, all these people and signs,
Well,
all
it's, they're
20
just in
20
one little
people.
line up
Yeah.
to the door, and I was like, really? That's all you can muster out of this whole state? That's, you know, Salt Lake is, the
They were
governors,
worn out
or
from
not the
their parade.
governor. I know a couple weeks ago, the mayor was just ecstatic that Salt Lake City last year was voted the gayest city in America. He was like, oh. But that, liberties. I was impressed that he had so much scientific evidence of how it destroys our liberties.
I'm sure from that his ministry, Wall Builders,
Mhm.
that we can find all of that.
I would like to. I can't write very fast. But I could share some with you, but that's not what tonight is about. And she has stuff to share about natural law, so.
Anything else about that law lecture?
It was good.
Do you all have the law by Bastiat?
She talks a lot about Bastiat in her.
I didn't read
that
it. My
is
kids have
the
read it.
foundational book because it talks very pointedly about all these.
It's
different
called the
principles.
law?
Yes.
Oh, the law.
It's little.
Well, I have a copy
It's only about that
somewhere.
thick.
We've got
2
several
copies.
I wanna
copies.
read that.
Yeah, we've
Yeah.
got several copies.
So you've got to read that.
With all the
I'm
quotes
sure they
that
have
she
it at the
shared by
library.
him, every time I was like,
Who is this guy?
My kids could not stop talking about it when they were reading it for a political youth political group.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Supervisor.
He, this book group that my cousin's in, she said, going to this book club. I said, so am I, right? I just invited myself. And so I went to my first meeting of that, and we read That Which Is Seen and That Which Is Not Seen. That's also by Bastiat. And it was more economic kind of point of view, but it was just a very logical, this is why these laws that people think make sense don't make sense. And it was very logical. And it was over and over the same argument, but in a lot of different points of view, the different scenarios. So that's another one.
That's how I felt about the world split apart. He just said the same thing in more and more. I mean, he just showed situation after situation, but he just kept saying the same thing. That really struck me. I don't know why it struck me so profoundly this time, but over and over again, it comes down to a principle that I learned this time.
Ooh, I'm taking note of that. Where's my principal list?
The first time he said it, I thought, that doesn't really sound like a principle because it's so specific. He said, only moral criteria can help the West against communism's well-planned world strategy. But then,
Wait, say
somewhere else,
only moral
well,
criteria.
I'm gonna change it. But he said the first time, only moral criteria can help the West against communism's well-planned world strategy. And then in capital letters, I wrote, there are no other criteria.
Because that's
Only
what he
moral
said.
criteria.
Mhm.
So then I thought, that's a principle. And then I thought, well, it's so specific to,
The West.
yeah, the West and communism. But over here, he says it in another way, and I didn't write it word for word. I just said, once again, loss of moral integrity is the root of weakness. Or loss of moral integrity is the loss of liberty, really.
Sin.
Over, yes, and that's what I know I wrote that down. Where did I write that?
Okay, now
Because I remember
missed
hearing
that.
that.
I'm trying to get it all
Sin.
down. Loss of moral liberty. No.
Loss of moral liberty is the root of weakness. Because that's what he says at the very beginning. The problem with America is a lack of courage.
Yeah.
You're weak. You've gone so much towards material things that you've weakened yourselves into nothing. I mean, you just over and over.
And the founding fathers warned us of that.
Look,
Right.
They said the Constitution is only good for immoral people.
Where did he? And I know I wrote that about sin. I loved this too. All of communism's meaningless pledges and oaths are about man with a capital M. and his earthly happiness. And I thought, that's it. That's
Ooh, you know what I also thought was so interesting? I guess we're on to Worlds
Sorry.
Apart. No, that's good. Let's go there and then we'll come back to Lecture 5. Another thing that I thought was so interesting was he was saying the East went for socialism and communism. The West went for humanism. And the root of all of it is materialism. That's the problem with all of it, that we're choosing stuff instead of God. And so we in the West, as a general thing, shun communism. You know, we have
Overtly.
yes, yeah, exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. But we just go about it a different way. But he said the root of all of it is materialism. I thought that was very interesting. And to me, materialism is other gods before God. The opposite of materialism is embracing God.
And our founders saw that. And that was my note on that very thing when he said, I thought, that's why they wrote the Constitution. They were trying to fight materialism from the very beginning. They knew that was the problem, that would cause a lack of morality. It was materialism.
I don't see anything about semester that.
I know I wrote down.
Ew. And now he is from where?
Russia.
That's what I thought. He basically said that when he was.
Yeah.
And I love how, I just love honest people. You know, he said, and this is in 1978. He said, is this country an example for my country? No, I don't think so. Because you've lost your courage. You've lost your.
And we've worked too hard to get back to being spiritual to even look at you.
Yeah.
I mean, he said that in not so many words.
Yeah.
We had fought hard to come back from communism.
And he
We are not
said,
going there
We're on the
again.
road to it.
right, and he said something about the last 60 years, the 30 years. He said, a fact which cannot be disputed is the weakening of human beings in the West because of ease and our materialism. While in the East they are becoming firmer and stronger. 60 years for our people of becoming firm and strong, and 30 years for the people of Eastern Europe. During that time, we have been through a spiritual training far in advance of Western experience. I think that's so true because of desperation.
That's what trial does for you.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they were definitely being tried.
Yeah, it would be interesting to know a little more about Solzhenitsyn and his background. Does anyone
Yeah,
else know any more about him than just
I've
what
read
I've just said?
a few of his books.
Have you? How many has he written? Because that's when I first heard Audrey talk about him. I was like, ooh, I want to read about him.
What do you know, John?
We wrote one called Gulag Archipelago.
Yeah,
Wrote
I
about the
read
Gulags.
that
Most
one.
famous one.
And then there's one,
He wrote a
Notes
fictional
from the
story.
Underground. So a lot of stuff from Russia.
Right.
He was thrown
And he
in
wrote
prison camps in
a
Russia.
fictional story about a gulag, and I'm trying to remember what the guy's name was that he used, but he just
Yeah.
wrote a whole story about this man that got put in the gulag and what it was like there and what he went through.
So
was-
how did he get here if he was
He
thrown into
got-
prison camps?
He
Was he
escaped Russia.
He escaped.
Well, because I think he wrote Gulag Archipelago, and he went to Britain to publish it, and published it, and couldn't go back to Russia. So I mean, he didn't escape Russia,
Doesn't it mention
but
that?
once he wrote it, he couldn't go back, and he came to the U.S.
What?
Somewhere.
Yeah. So he spent time in those, but he didn't actually escape.
When she talks about him, she talks about his situation. It's been a while since
To your point of dying, of being willing to, is death worth this?
Mhm.
This is what Solzhenitsyn says. He says, no weapons, no matter how powerful, can help the West until it overcomes its loss of willpower. In a state of psychological weakness, weapons become a burden for the capitulating side. To defend oneself, one must also be ready to die. There is little such readiness in a society raised in the cult of material well-being. That's how I feel about our society. Nobody's willing to die for anything, or even much less put their neck out there. Yeah.
Well, and when he talks about Vietnam and it being
Oh,
willing
yes.
to fight,
Yeah.
and he was, and that's when he was talking about that. And my note with that was, I don't know if I can find it, but I remember thinking the soldier was willing to die. The
the
political
people-
leaders were not.
Yeah.
It was all for political gain that happened, not because
Drug trade.
the soldier was not willing to die for the freedom of another. Because they went and they were willing.
Maybe because I'm too young, but I didn't realize. I mean, he says 30 million people suffered because America pulled out of that war.
Well,
It ended up being,
communism for
and he said, do those people who protested this war because it was so bad, do they feel those 30 million people on their backs? Do they?
And
I
that
thought,
was and that was my other note.
Well, yeah, it's all of Southeast
Cambodia.
Asia was affected by that.
I wish I could find this. I wrote so many notes. That my other note on that was along those lines of when political decisions are made based on popular reaction, like we had during Vietnam. The unfortunate thing is we are too far away from the consequences. They were not
That wasn't,
forced.
that wasn't popular reaction. That
Well,
was
they made it
orchestrated.
look like popular reaction.
Yeah, I mean, of
The
course they have
anti-war
to.
reaction was immediate popular reaction.
And
But
he
the
talks
thing
about
is,
that in here
yeah,
too.
he
But
does.
it
But-
was manipulated and
Sure
caused
it
to happen by
was.
the same people that started the war. Yeah.
But my thought was, because of that, probably partly because of that, they make it so far away. There's no, they were not forced to see the consequences of their choices. And that's the unfortunate part is, we here in America are so isolated by the media that we don't see the consequences of the choices of our leaders. And that was a question that I had that I would really like to ask.